parents, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child.
What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot.
Materialism has to do with when you are
Hello, a very warm welcome back to the course in Values and Spirituality. Today we will be looking at espoused and applied values. We're going to be taking the subject of values in deeper. In the past episodes, what we have done is cover the different types of values, what do they mean, and how they play a role in your life. Sister Denise, our speaker, is the author of these books, and she is giving her wisdom and her understanding of what values are and how to close the gap between what we believe and the way we behave. So, Sister Denise, it's fabulous to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, Sister Denise, I found this terminology rather curious. You use the word espoused and applied values. So tell us in this context what it means.
Espoused means that you claim that you have that value. And you tell people, I am like this, I'm an honest person, I believe like this, and I do like this, and so on. That is your espoused. That's the meaning of what's espoused by you. We use this word because of the discrepancy between what you claim is how you live and then the actual evidence of your individual actions tells otherwise.
And what is applied values?
That means that you're actually doing what you say you're doing. You're walking your talk.
So one is a belief about yourself, and the other is the reality about yourself.
Exactly.
I would now like to take you to page 41, which starts as follows. Generally, there is a gap between our espoused values and what we actually demonstrate through our actions and behavior. It is easy to talk about values, but we can deceive ourselves in applying them. You start this chapter on a very strong note. When people fall short of their own standards, when an individual looks at his or her values, we tend not to focus on the behavior rather than our beliefs.
And this is because of a phenomenon which is called denial.
Of what?
I'm not angry. Yeah.
Right, yes, that sounds very familiar. Yes.
You see, because we have such a, you can say, intellectualization of what we think we are, and we cannot see what we think we are. I like CCTV because of this. All over the world, you're caught on camera every few minutes, especially if you live in a city environment in the West. There are cameras everywhere. And the police is often able to catch people and convict people on the basis of the television footage, and the police will wear body cams and so on. If you see yourself on camera, you can't deny it because the camera doesn't lie. But in a culture where you look at yourself from the inside, you don't see what it looks like from somebody else's angle. You're able to deceive yourself. But when you have so many cameras around, it's a bit difficult to deceive yourself because someone can say, well, here's the footage. You see, if you're in a position of power and somebody challenges what you're doing, you will assert your power and say that that person is a liar and discount or disregard the challenges. So, or else if you're in a position of power and influence and you will ask people, do I behave badly? And they'll say, no, you know, you're very good. Mm-hmm. So this supports a culture of deception and lying to the self, deceiving the self. Politeness and lying becomes the same thing. So these values get all mixed up, and the good and the bad changes position all the time. It's really the reason why people have such a skewed vision of themselves.
A skewed vision of themselves, that's rather an interesting way of looking at it. I see in the next few lines the word prejudice comes up a lot. When I read the word prejudice in this context, at the back of my mind there popped a word, hypocrisy.
Well, yes.
Prejudice itself. Tell us more about that.
Let's go back for a moment to the idea of the patriarchal system. And what that does in terms of espoused and applied values is if somebody who's a male, who is the head of the household or the head of the industry or the office or whatever it is, they say, well, I'm a man and therefore I must be superior and my activities must be correct because I'm a man and superior. And so they will position themselves based on this idea, which is a prejudice that anyone who is not a man and who is inferior either in status or gender or whatever, caste, class, all of this applies. Anyone inferior must by definition be dishonest, and anyone superior is by definition the one who calls the shots, the one who decides on the morality. So whatever they say, that becomes the value. And this is where you get the hypocrisy happening really easily. And this is why I think that when you reset the balance, you're going to be able to sort out this problem. But at the moment, it's really underlies the difficulty and underlies the discrepancy.
You go on to state, to intellectualize a value causes inconsistency. Most people are well able to define values, but rarely have the power to adhere to those principles. Putting values into practice gets misconstrued either as a sign of weakness or as an unattainable ideal. I would like you to tell our viewers what it means to intellectualize a value. And what I need to understand is the following. You obviously have thought about all of this very deeply. How does one know that you've crossed the line between churning in order to understand something and then intellectualizing it? How do you know where you are at?
There are certain turns of phrase that are giveaways. And one of the most frequently used is if, then. If you would be a good person, then you would never lie. And you are a good person, therefore whatever you say can't be a lie. Logically completely incoherent and inconsistent. Or you make wide generalizations. Usually it's preceded by this word if. And so whenever I hear people talking in that way, I will actually point it out to them and say, if means it's a speculation. And a speculation is by definition not real. Can we just deal with realities, please?
When you were teaching this course at universities, is this what you shared with the students?
Well, I established rules.
What rules?
One of the rules is no generalizations, because if you make a generalization like all Gujaratis dance the Garba, many do, no doubt. But if you can find one who doesn't, it means that generalization is not true. So it's very, very difficult to find a generalization that's true. People speak in generalizations a lot. And the other thing I say to people is no accusations, no speculations, no speeches. By speeches I mean when you repeat yourself with a view of trying to force a person to accept what you're saying by just pushing it down their throat. You cannot arrive at truth using falsehood.
That's so profound. Do we do that?
All the time. People regularly communicate in generalizations, accusations, speculations, speeches. That means our communication style has serious flaws in it. And once you start to bring in rules like this and hold people to it, having got their agreement that they accept to be held to it, then they start to realize, because you will stop them every third word, then they say, oh, but you're not letting me say anything. I said, if you say something which is not a generalization, not a speculation, not an accusation, there's no problem. And this is where a lot of people find that they don't talk in any other way than that. And so you're going back to the drawing board of how you communicate. And you have to be very creative, because the template for communicating truthfully isn't there.
Your answer actually leads me on to my next question, which is to be found in paragraph 2. Balance and clarity are essential in applying values, otherwise you make ill-considered judgments or perform unwise action. When I read this, a funny thought popped into my mind. Do we need to teach ourselves how to think?
That is the most important thing there is. In my view, education is about learning how to think. But it's very rarely conveyed and conducted in that manner. What the purpose of this course is to really get us to think, so that we can take responsibility for what we think, what we say, and what we do, and which means that we're taking responsibility for accepting the consequences of our karma, and we are admitting that whatever I do, I take the consequences of it. So if something happens to me, nobody else is to blame except me. And so this pushing of responsibility back onto the self is important, because one of the problems is you lay blame on others for what you yourself did. Because people don't really know how to think sharply, others can get away with confusing them or misleading them, and you have to be very sharp to put your finger on these things.
I don't understand. How do you teach yourself to think, Sister Denise? What do you do? How do you go about it? Are they your instruments of the soul? Are they, do you have to reprogram the way you function?
Absolutely. And to me, the key is following the voice of conscience. Because you see, whenever you say something about yourself and you do the opposite, your conscience will give you a signal. Now, if you ignore that signal, eventually your conscience is going to say, well, I'm going on holiday because I don't have any function around here. And then you're forced to listen to external moral authorities who will tell you something that suits their convenience, you see. And then you get a world of dishonesty. And you have this well-known phrase in India, Juti Maya, Juti Kaya, Juta Sab Sansar, the illusion is false, your body is false, that means your persona, and the whole world is false. So we're operating in a world of illusion, a world of falsehood, and trying to bring truth into it. So that's a major undertaking.
You go on to mention that understanding and experience are needed to judge when to be flexible and when to be firm. When I read the sentence, the vision that came to mind is the guy who's holding a pole doing tightrope walking.
Well, you're really functioning on the edge, and you do have to be balanced. And if you're rigid, you will fall over. You have to be flexible to be balanced.
Let's go now to paragraph 3. When you live according to any particular value, it brings forth other values. That is so beautiful. So no value exists in isolation. And Dadi Janki was right when she said, your values are your friends, and your friends will bring more friends.
That's right.
The next line, a person who has attained humility will have also developed courage, honesty, love, and compassion. Without these, your apparently humble behavior is obsequious and based in veiled pride. It was very disconcerting for me to read this, because what you're saying is what you think is part of your good side can actually be a weakness.
You see, there's the problem of self-deception. Very, very few people can see themselves as they are. Ego is sometimes described as an inferiority complex or a superiority complex. So you either think that you're better than you are or worse than you are. Either way, you don't get it right. If you are performing or demonstrating humility, but you're actually full of ego, then that humility will be fake, and someone who's real will detect it. And you know, the way that you achieve humility is you have to go through a great deal of humiliation, which will destroy your ego defense mechanisms. And we get into these much later down the line when we get into about chapter 7 or 6 or 7. But you see that we're beginning to come up against this thing called false ego. And so self-deception is the greatest challenge to an individual. And to be able to be so detached from oneself that you can see your own falsehood, that's a huge achievement.
The next line reads, the more you think about your morality and check your motives, the more you are impelled to refine and cultivate your values. You become aware of and remove the discrepancies between your espoused values and how you apply them. I found the word motives here to have gripped my attention the most, because I tend not to look at my actions. I tend to look at my intentions only. If you're an individual who always has noble intentions and noble motives, what then should be paid attention to as far as conduct is concerned?
Well, to me, everything is in the intentions and the motives. Because whatever your motive is, your action will follow from that motive. And if you think that you can do something and make it look like something else, it won't. Because your motives show through. They are the seed of your actions. I would say that a person who's totally focused on their motives and their intentions, that is an honest person, that is a wise person.
On page 42, you say, removing internal consistencies and contradictions is an ongoing process. What is the motivation to do that? Because it's an uphill climb all the way, and it's not something that you can delegate to somebody else. You have to do it yourself.
When we're talking about motivations, why do you do anything that you do? It is because you want to be right with yourself. If that is your ultimate motivation, then you will constantly be focused on that.
I really enjoyed the manner in which you ended this paragraph. It reads as follows. If, however, we assume that the original nature of all human beings is essentially good, and instead of pointing the finger at others, turn it towards ourselves, we are more inclined to practice our values. That places the ball squarely in our court.
You know, one of the consequences of this kind of study is you become internally directed. Most people are what we call in spirituality body conscious. That means reality is only what you can see through your eyes, hear through your ears. That means what's out there. An internally directed person is concerned with this and what's in here and what's going out there from in here. Regarding what's out there, we say be a detached observer. Whatever it is, because your jurisdiction is over yourself.
What surprises me about that one is that we spend our lives giving ourselves jurisdiction over others.
But in terms of the philosophy of karma, you don't. You cannot take responsibility for somebody else's karma. You cannot say somebody else's karma is the cause of your karma. You are the cause of your own karma, you see. And because people are very keen on correcting each other, you know, they have this very famous sign, yes. One finger pointing at others and 3 fingers pointing back at yourself, you see. So it's a well-known intellectualization. Oh, we shouldn't do that, and then you do it.
When I'm looking at the amount of time and energy that needs to be invested in achieving this, what is stated in this paragraph, it becomes quite obvious to me that one has to give oneself time in order to become this. My question is that the external world is pulling on one all the time. How are you able to live and do this because of the amount of time that this takes?
How much time do you spend worrying?
That's an unfair question.
You say, well, this takes a lot of time. Well, worrying takes a lot of time too. But you don't think, oh, I don't have time to worry. You just carry on worrying. But you do think, I don't have time for this. Partly, you have to put in a lot of energy to do something positive, but you require almost no energy to do something negative. This is a wonder. So, you know, people's assumption that it doesn't cost you anything to do something good, that statement is absolutely erroneous, not based on any evidence at all. It takes very little to be destructive and a great deal to be constructive. And this is why a person needs a lot of energy, and the way you get that energy is through the meditation.
Well, this brings us to the end of our half-an-hour slot. Thank you very much, Sister Denise.
Thank you.
There you go, espoused and applied values, what you believe you should be and what you actually are, and the difference in between. Sister Denise has dropped a large number of bombs in this episode, and she's given us a lot of food for thought. What I like especially about it, the responsibility of changing your attitudes into your actions is totally up to you, and this is not something that one can delegate to another human being. Sister Denise has provided us with an arsenal of tools that we can use in order to close the gap between your beliefs and your behavior. A very profound message. Thank you, Sister Denise. I hope to see you back again soon. Take care and goodbye.